I'm Rick Johanson, and this is IronEcho Design. Some friends of ours invited us up to their ski house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and as a thank you, I wanted to create a custom house logo for the thank you card. I've seen these on Instagram. They're pretty easy to make, and I'll walk you through in Inkscape here how you can set things up and use some of the basic tools to make these pretty quickly. And it'll work with any house. Theirs happens to be an A-frame, which makes it pretty easy. You want to isolate the basic shape. So I have a square here. I see a triangle up here. You don't need to overcomplicate things with every little detail, but you do want to capture the character of the house, and we can do that by focusing on simple elements. We also want to keep the line weight the same for everything. And I want to draw your attention to, if you're on the selector tool, you'll see these 4 buttons right here. The first one, if you hover on it, says when scaling objects, scale the stroke width by the same proportion. Let's actually start this example the way it is by default and the way it might actually be on your Inkscape already, which is selected. So with it selected, it means when we scale the object down, it'll scale that width in proportion. Normally that would be great, but when we're doing a design like today, we want the stroke width to be uniform so we can play with the shapes and not have to keep adjusting things. So to do that, if I draw a different one out, I'm going to deselect the button. And now watch what happens. If I scale it down, it looks like it's doing the first behavior, but when you let go, it puts it right back to whatever your setting was. I brought in a color palette to help things go faster, and I'll have these color codes in the description below. Let's change our square to the yellow. And let's make this house. I want to use a path effect called Mirror Symmetry. And I'll start by having my object selected and go to Path, Object to Path. When I go to Edit Paths by Node, I can see the 4 nodes I just created. And an important step, before you go up to Path and choose a path effect, you want to have your object and do Control G. All that did was to create a group, and the group only has this object, but we're going to need that during the mirror symmetry part. Now we can go up to Path, Path Effects, and hit this plus to add a path effect. You'll get your menu, open it up. In the mode, it should say Freely Defined Mirror Line. You can take the center node and drag it out. And here's how easy it is. If I click on my original shape, I can then take the top node here and bring it up, and it gets mirrored in real time. One of the confusing things about Inkscape, especially for beginners, is you might think, okay, this is great. I've got mirror symmetry set up. I can see my path effects. It says mirror symmetry. So if I create another line on this side, it'll definitely, oh, it doesn't show up. How come? Let me show you how you can set things up so it'll keep mirroring until you tell it not to. We'll do that by going up to Object, Layers and Objects, and yours, when you open it up for the first time, will probably just say Layer 1. I retitled my Layer 1 Intro Layer, and that just has all this stuff, the color palettes, its instructions here. You can add a layer by hitting this plus. And for layer 2, I retitled that the design layer. That's the layer that we're on. And here's the one important step you can do so you can keep mirroring on the fly. Click over here, this G2291, that just means group. Why don't we call that mirror group so it makes more sense. Just because it's highlighted doesn't mean that we're in the group. If you right click over it, you want to enter group mirror group. Now, whatever I do is going to be mirrored just like this original part. See? And as long as I'm inside this mirror group, I can keep adding more parts. So let's make the roof line. Actually, for that, why don't we change it on the stroke style? Let's do 8. Nice and thick. That's too thick. 7. I manipulated this node so it had a nice point. And while we're here on the stroke style, for join, I like having this sharp miter join. And for cap, I have it just squared off. Once you have it the way you like it, and that's all you want to do for mirror symmetry, we got to get out of that group. Double click anywhere on the canvas and you'll see the highlight go up to your main layer. Also, just to be safe, especially when the design gets more and more complicated, you should go back to each of these parts and do path, object to path. See how the path effect's gone? That means I can grab everything and move it, and it's not going to keep trying to mirror off of that original center line. Time to put in that sliver of siding. I'll grab the squares and rectangle tool, just make a box. Stroke can be off, fill will be this gray. When you go to selector tool, you can go up to the hierarchy and drop it to the bottom. The next tip I want to go over is snapping and how to enable snapping. This icon right here, this magnet with electricity, when it's selected, that means snapping is on. When you hit the triangle, you have all these different choices. For this exercise, we want to have bounding boxes selected, corners selected, as well as edges, and this is why. Back to my rectangle, I'm making that first floor, the basement, path, object to path. Now I can go in and you'll see what I mean. It very easily knows bounding box to corner. You can also bring it up right there. Very convenient. Drag this down to whatever height you think would look good. Time for the deck, which we'll represent by making the railing. This rectangle, we'll do Control D to duplicate it, bring it up. Actually take the fill off. Railing can come way down. About there is good. Control D to that because I'm going to use that again later. Put that aside. There's a million ways you can make the railing, or the balusters I think they're called. You can draw it in manually, but you know me, I like to cheat a bit here. Brought down 2 individual lines. With them both selected, I can go up to Extensions, Generate from Path, Interpolate. We're going to use it to repeat this line as many times as we tell it in between the two, and when you have it set to exponent 1, it'll be perfectly even. Let's see what 14 looks like, live preview. Pretty good. Let's try it. Apply. Bring it up. Yeah, that'll do. It looks like I'm coming out lucky, but I did try this beforehand. You can move your window lines or get real precise if you want to, but I'm just going to do Control D to duplicate it and slide it over here as well. Actually, let's take that Control D and use it again at the very end. And these posts will slide right over here because something needs to support the deck. There we go. Let's pop a door in here. Once you have it set up and it's always going to be 4 millimeters, you can see you can move around pretty quick. So you don't have to go back to the mirror symmetry. I'm going to do, they had this triangle coming off of the side. Watch this. If you double click on any object, you'll see a hash mark in the center. I'm going to bring that hash mark down to this point right here, the pivot point. Now when I grab a handle, it swings. I'll turn snapping off so it's easier. It swings against wherever that pivot point goes. Without the mirror symmetry, I can select both of those 2 triangle parts, Control G to group it. On my directionals, I'll flip it. And when I hold Control down, that lets me slide it perfectly along that horizontal axis. I saved this railing because there was a nice side staircase up to the main area of the house. Let's actually drop in some stairs and make them safe with the railings. This, go to Path, Object to Path. That makes them all independent, which will help us so we can just grab what we need, delete the ones we don't want. And let's see what it looks like sliding these into place. As a bonus, I want to add one more pop, a little detail here. I'm going to slide in. I just duplicated the left window there, and it lets you change that shape so it becomes a glare. And there you have it. They're really fun to make. It's super simple. As long as you change the setting here and get the hang of the mirror symmetry, it's pretty easy to do. So hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions about it or ideas for videos, let me know in the comments, and we'll see you next time.